All right, so get this. We're diving deep today into how this like tiny universe in your gut, uh, it might actually hold the key to unlocking the true potential of psychedelics.
Yeah.
Today's deep dive is all about the gut microbiome and its impact on psychedelic therapy.
It's pretty fascinating. The gut microbiome has been getting so much attention lately. We've always known, of course, that it plays a role in digestion, but now we're discovering just how much deeper it's connected to our brains and our mental health.
Yeah, so just anyone listening
Yeah.
who hasn't already like geeked out on gut bacteria, we're talking about trillions of microorganisms that are living in our digestive tracts. And the research suggests that these like little guys, they might be crucial for how psychedelics work, especially when it comes to mood and cognition.
Yeah. One of the most exciting areas of research right now is how the gut microbiome interacts with setting of a psychedelic experience. There was a 2024 study by Burkle and colleagues. They surveyed over 1,000 people who had used psychedelics, and they found that positive motivations for using these substances, like things like personal growth and supportive environments, those things actually led to more positive outcomes overall.
Yeah, it's amazing how much like our mindset and our surroundings can affect any experience. Just like
Yeah.
think about a time when you felt totally at ease and how much that just like shaped your perception of things. It makes you wonder if we could like prep our gut microbiome in a similar way.
That's a great point, and it really ties into this idea of like personalized medicine. Like, could we, for example, tailor someone's diet or use prebiotics to like optimize their gut microbiome for a better therapeutic response?
That's a really fascinating thought. But before we jump ahead too far, let's break down like one specific psychedelic that's been making waves in the therapeutic world, MDMA.
Yeah, MDMA, also known as ecstasy, it's shown a lot of promise in treating PTSD, and it interacts with serotonin receptors in the brain, which, is a key neurotransmitter for regulating our mood.
So how exactly does MDMA work its magic on those serotonin receptors?
Well, so MDMA increases the release of serotonin and dopamine in the brain. And those two neurotransmitters are heavily involved in mood regulation, motivation, and even the feeling of reward. And this might explain why people often report feeling euphoric and more connected after taking MDMA.
It's not all sunshine and rainbows, right?
Yeah.
MDMA comes with some risks too.
Absolutely. So there are some common side effects, like increased heart rate, anxiety, jaw clenching. But then there are more serious risks, especially with high doses, things like hyperthermia, hyponatremia, and even potential neurotoxicity.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that while psychedelics do have this therapeutic potential, they're not to be taken lightly. So we've got these serotonin receptors being activated by psychedelics. What's the connection to the gut microbiome?
That's where things get really interesting. So gut bacteria can actually produce metabolites, like tryptamine, and that can actually influence serotonin levels in the brain.
Hold on, so the stuff in our gut can actually change our brain chemistry.
That's right. And this raises a really big question. Could manipulating the gut microbiome enhance the effects of psychedelics?
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's unpack this further. You mentioned tryptamine, but what about other serotonin receptors? I remember reading about a few different types in some of the research we have.
Right, you're right. There are different types of serotonin receptors, and they all respond to serotonin in slightly different ways. It's like having different locks for the same key. But research suggests that psychedelics in general seem to primarily work their magic through the 5-HT2A receptor subtype.
Yeah, and we actually have two really in-depth sources on this, one from Nichols in 2016 and another from Roth in 2006. They really get into the nitty-gritty of what this 5-HT2A receptor does.
Yeah, so these sources really highlight how important the 5-HT2A receptor is for the effects of psychedelics. For example, psilocybin, the psychoactive compound in magic mushrooms, it seems to work through this receptor to enhance positive mood and reduce the recognition of negative emotions.
So basically, psilocybin might help us like dampen down negative feelings. I could see how that could be really helpful in treating things like depression or anxiety. But what about LSD? Does it work the same way?
So LSD also primarily interacts with the 5-HT2A receptor, and research has shown that it can cause destabilization in brain networks. And this is linked to those feelings of ego dissolution and profound changes in consciousness that people often report.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. It really makes you appreciate the complexity of how these psychedelics are interacting with our brains. But what about those gut bacteria? How do they tie into all this serotonin receptor activity?
So that's where things get even more intriguing. Remember we mentioned those gut-derived metabolites. That can influence serotonin levels. Well, this is where the connection to the brain becomes crucial.
So you're saying that the bacteria in our gut could be influencing the way psychedelics interact with those crucial serotonin receptors. in our brains.
Exactly. It's mind-blowing to think that these tiny organisms could be playing such a significant role in shaping our psychedelic experiences.
And it really highlights the interconnectedness of our bodies, right? The gut, the brain, the environment. It's all intertwined. We even have some research on how these connections might play out differently across cultures.
You're talking about the work by Eng and colleagues, right? Their research really highlights the importance of ethnopsychopharmacology, which basically means considering cultural and social factors in how people respond to medication.
Yeah, they found that there are these ethnic differences in drug responses, particularly in how certain psychotropics are metabolized.
And they also explored how cultural beliefs and social norms can shape people's attitudes toward medication, which can impact how willing they are to seek treatment or follow a prescribed regimen.
Which brings us to a really thought-provoking question. Could the gut microbiome be part of the reason why people respond differently to psychedelics?
That's a great question, and it's something that researchers are actively investigating. Could the unique composition of our gut microbiome, shaped by factors like our genetics, diet, and environment, influence how our bodies process and respond to these substances?
I'm dying to know more, but it seems like we've reached a natural stopping point for now.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
But don't worry, we're just getting started. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll continue to unravel the mysteries of the gut microbiome and its potential impact on psychedelic therapy.
We'll delve deeper into the mechanisms at play and explore what this could mean for the future of mental health treatment.
Welcome back. I'm still reeling from that last part, especially that idea that what's happening in our gut could actually be influencing our brains during a psychedelic experience.
Yeah, it's a pretty radical concept, right? But the more we learn about the gut microbiome, the more we realize just how interconnected our bodies really are.
So let's pick up where we left off. We were talking about the possibility that the gut microbiome could explain why some people respond differently to psychedelics. What kind of evidence is there to support that?
Well, so we know that gut bacteria produce a wide variety of metabolites. These are basically byproducts of their metabolism, and some of these metabolites can actually act as neurotransmitters or influence neurotransmitter production in the brain.
So are there specific metabolites produced by gut bacteria that have been linked to like psychedelic effects?
So there's a class of metabolites called tryptamines that researchers are particularly interested in. And some gut bacteria have the ability to produce tryptamine, which is actually a precursor to serotonin.
With serotonin, that's the same neurotransmitter that's heavily involved in mood regulation and how psychedelics work, right?
Exactly, and it's not just about serotonin. Another study published in the journal Cell back in 2018 found that certain psychedelic compounds, including LSD and DMT, can actually promote structural and functional changes in the brain, something called neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity? It sounds pretty technical. Can you break that down for us?
Sure, so neuroplasticity basically refers to the brain's ability to change and adapt over time. Think of it as the brain's way of rewiring itself based on our experiences.
So are you saying that psychedelics might be enhancing the brain's capacity for change and that our gut microbiome could be playing a role in this process?
That's what some researchers are suggesting, and if it turns out to be true, it could have huge implications for using psychedelics to treat mental health conditions like depression, anxiety, and addiction, which often involve disruptions in neuroplasticity.
Okay, I'm officially mind blown. So we've got these gut bacteria producing metabolites that could influence serotonin levels and potentially even boost the brain's ability to change and heal itself. It makes you wonder if we could somehow harness this power to make psychedelic therapy even more effective.
That's the million-dollar question. Imagine if we could tailor someone's diet or give them specific prebiotics to encourage the growth of beneficial bacteria that produce those helpful metabolites.
That would be incredible, like personalized medicine for the mind.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about another aspect of psychedelic therapy that's been getting a lot of attention, the role of the therapist.
Right. The human element is so important in any form of therapy. We have a fascinating paper from 2018 by Nielsen and Gus that explores the role of therapists' firsthand experience with psychedelics in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy.
This is the paper that sparked all those debates about whether therapists should have personal experience with the substances they're using in therapy, right?
Exactly. It's a really complex issue. The authors argue that therapists' personal experience could actually give them valuable insight into the subjective experiences of their patients, leading to greater empathy and understanding.
But on the other hand, there's the concern that therapists might project their own experiences onto their patients or develop biases.
It's a delicate balance for sure. The authors acknowledge that we need more research to really figure out the optimal level of therapist experience in psychedelic-assisted therapy.
It makes sense that there wouldn't be a one-size-fits-all approach, and this actually brings up another important point: individual variability in responses to psychedelics. I mean, some people have profound life-altering experiences while others have more mild or even challenging experiences. Why is that?
There are so many factors at play, genetics, personality, past experiences, the set and setting. It's a complex interplay.
And now we can add the gut microbiome to that list of potential variables, right?
Absolutely. If the gut microbiome is influencing serotonin levels and neuroplasticity, it could be a big part of why people respond differently to psychedelics.
This brings us right back to the idea of personalized psychedelic therapy. If we could analyze someone's gut microbiome, could we predict how they might respond to a particular psychedelic?
It's definitely a possibility, and maybe we could even adjust their diet or recommend specific prebiotics to optimize their gut microbiome for the best possible therapeutic outcome.
Okay, now we're really getting into the future of mental health treatment. But before we get carried away, it's important to remember that research in this area is still in its early stages. There's a lot more we need to learn before we can apply these findings in clinical practice.
You're right, but the potential is definitely there now, if we have a little more time. I'd love to dive into another fascinating aspect of psychedelic research, the pharmacology of LSD.
LSD. Huh? That's one I haven't heard much about today. Tell me more.
Well, we have this comprehensive review article from 2008 by Passy and colleagues that really gets into the nitty-gritty of how LSD works in the brain. It turns out that, like other psychedelics we've discussed, LSD also primarily exerts its effects through its interaction with serotonin receptors, specifically the 5-HT2A subtype.
That 5-HT2A receptor sure is popular. It seems like it's the key player in most psychedelic experiences.
It really does seem that way, and this review article highlights how LSD's strong affinity for the 5-HT2A receptor explains its potent psychedelic effects. They also explore how LSD is absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and eliminated from the body. Basically, they trace its entire journey from the moment it enters the body to the moment it leaves.
It's like detective work at the molecular level.
Exactly, and understanding how LSD behaves in the body is crucial for developing safe and effective therapeutic protocols.
That makes sense. We need to know how the drug is working in the body to make sure it's being used safely and effectively. But I'm curious, where exactly in the brain is LSD binding to those 5-HT2A receptors?
Well, research using a technique called autoradiography has shown that 5-HT2A receptors are spread throughout the brain with particularly high concentrations in areas involved in sensory perception, emotion, and cognition.
So that explains why LSD can produce such a wide range of effects. Everything from visual hallucinations to altered emotional states to profound shifts in consciousness.
Precisely. And because LSD can activate these 5-HT2A receptors in these key areas of the brain, researchers are exploring its therapeutic potential for conditions like depression, anxiety, and addiction.
So LSD might be able to disrupt those negative thought patterns, help people manage anxiety, and even promote emotional healing? That's pretty incredible. But the brain is a complex organ, and I imagine LSD's effects go beyond just serotonin receptors.
You're absolutely right. The review article also mentions research on LSD's effects on brainwaves, which are basically the rhythmic electrical oscillations in the brain. It turns out that LSD can alter brainwave activity in ways that might contribute to its psychedelic effects.
So LSD is messing with the brain's electrical symphony.
You could say that it seems to shift the balance of brainwave activity toward a state of heightened arousal and reduced inhibition.
And this might explain those feelings of transcendence and interconnectedness that people often report with LSD.
That's one theory, and it speaks to the incredible power and complexity of the human brain.
I'm starting to think we need a whole separate deep dive just on brainwaves and psychedelics.
I'd be down for that, but for now, let's get back to LSD. The review article also touches on research suggesting that LSD interacts with dopamine and glutamate receptors in the brain, although not as strongly as it interacts with serotonin receptors.
Hold on. Dopamine and glutamate, those are both important neurotransmitters too, right?
You bet. Dopamine is involved in reward, motivation, and pleasure, while glutamate is the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter.
So LSD is tweaking these systems as well, which probably adds to its complex tapestry of effects. Does that mean it might also have some positive impacts on creativity or problem solving?
That's what some researchers speculate. LSD might be able to create a kind of fertile ground for new ideas, perspectives, and emotional breakthroughs. And there's even research suggesting it might be helpful in treating cluster headaches, a debilitating condition characterized by excruciatingly painful headaches.
Wow, that's amazing. We've learned so much about LSD just in these last few minutes. It's clear that there's still so much to discover about how it works and how it might be used therapeutically.
It's truly remarkable how much progress has been made in psychedelic research since LSD was first discovered back in the 1940s. And with the renewed interest in this field, we can expect even more groundbreaking discoveries in the years to come.
I'm so excited to see what the future holds for psychedelic science. But for now, we're going to have to take a short break from our deep dive.
Don't worry, we're not done yet. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll continue exploring the fascinating world of psychedelics and the gut microbiome.
We'll be diving into some even more mind-bending concepts, including the potential role of the gut microbiome in shaping our sense of self.
Until then, keep those minds curious and those guts healthy.
Okay, we're back for the final part of our deep dive, and I'm ready for more mind-blowing insights. We've talked about how the gut microbiome could impact our response to psychedelics, but now you're telling me these tiny organisms might influence our sense of self? That's a whole other level.
Yeah, it's a pretty radical concept, I know, but when you think about how interconnected the gut and brain are, it starts to make sense. We've talked about the gut-brain axis, that the two-way communication highway. What if the gut microbiome is actually shaping our sense of self through its influence on this pathway?
Could walk me through this. How can gut bacteria influence something as complex as our sense of self?
Well, think about all the things that contribute to our sense of self, right? Thoughts, emotions, memories, even physical sensations. Many of these are influenced by neurotransmitters, hormones, and other signaling molecules. And guess what? The gut microbiome can influence those too.
So you're saying if the gut microbiome is messing with these signaling pathways, it could subtly be shaping how we think, feel, and even perceive ourselves.
Exactly. It's like having a tiny orchestra in your gut, playing a subtle but constant melody that influences the overall composition of your sense of self.
Wow, that's an amazing image. So are you saying we're all just puppets of our microbiome?
Not quite. Our genes, experiences, and choices all play a huge role in shaping who we are. The gut microbiome is just another layer of complexity adding to the already intricate tapestry of our being.
That's a good way to put it. But if everyone has a unique gut microbiome, does that mean our gut bacteria contribute to our individuality?
That's one theory. It could be part of the reason why some people are naturally more anxious or outgoing than others, for example.
That's also fascinating, but let's bring it back to psychedelics. If our sense of self is being shaped by the gut microbiome, does that mean it's also influencing our psychedelic experiences?
It's definitely a possibility, and it reinforces the importance of set and setting in psychedelic therapy. Remember, the environment we're in during a psychedelic experience can profoundly affect how we perceive things, our emotions, and even our sense of self.
Right, so the gut, the brain, the environment, and the psychedelic substance are all playing a role in this incredibly complex dance.
And that dance can be incredibly powerful, leading to deep insights, healing, and personal transformation. But it's crucial to approach it with respect and a deep understanding of the potential risks and benefits.
Well said as we wrap up this deep dive. I'm struck by the realization that we're not just isolated individuals. We're walking talkings, ecosystems constantly interacting with the world around us, and our gut microbiome is a vital part of that ecosystem.
Absolutely. And the more we learn about this connection between the gut, the brain, and psychedelics, the more we realize just how much potential there is to use this knowledge to improve mental health and well-being.
It's mind-blowing to think that these tiny organisms we can't even see could be having such a profound impact on our experiences.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? And it makes you wonder, what other secrets are we going to uncover as we continue to explore this fascinating field?
I, for one, can't wait to find out. And that's a wrap on this deep dive into the gut microbiome and psychedelics. We encourage you to keep learning, questioning, and diving deeper into this fascinating field.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those guts healthy.